So next, we're going to move into maybe a bit of a zoom out or an abstraction, and look at the economic impact that the spotted lanternfly is going to have. Our next presenter is Gigi Digiacomo from the University of Minnesota.
Hi, thank you, Rufus, and thanks for having me here today. I liked your description of zooming out a little bit, and I will do exactly that. Um, Oops, hang on. Let's try that again. All right, let me get this going. Sorry, I've got too many like little windows up here. There we go. Now I can see it. Okay, there we go. So yes, I'm going to talk to you today about a spotted lanternfly socioeconomics, actually, and these are grape grower and consumer perceptions that we've collected during 2024 and 2025 as part of a larger study. It's a multi-state, multi-institution, multidisciplinary study called Area-Wide Management of the Invasive Spotted Lanternfly and Tree of Heaven. And this project is led by Julie Urban and a lot of other really smart people. I have their logos listed down there at the bottom of the screen. And the main objective is really to kind of kill or address, not kill, control two invasives at once. So we're going after, as the title implies, both SLF and Tree of Heaven. And we're going to be looking specifically at biological controls. So I think some of the folks who are on the last panel will be happy to hear that. And we're doing this with a combination of lab and field-based experiments in Pennsylvania and Virginia. Most of the field experiments will be in Virginia. I believe we have 5 wineries there, where growers will be working with us to test a number of different biologicals. And then throughout this project, we've woven in some socioeconomic um, um, research. And we're going to be looking at behavioral change amongst growers. And as an economist, I'm going to be looking at what are growers spending right now on SLF and Tree of Heaven? What are they costing the vineyards and growers of juice grapes now? And then what would it cost them if they were to implement some of these biological controls, the ones that are considered successful as a result of our field work? And so we'll be comparing those things because we know vineyards are businesses, right? And they need to be able to make changes and address SLF and Tree of Heaven, but to do so in a way that is not cost prohibitive. So that's where I'm coming in. I always share this slide when I'm talking about SLF because not everybody does know about it, especially the last call I was on. Most of the folks are from Canada. They were aware of it, but didn't really know where it had spread. But I know you all have seen this map probably a couple of times by now and know where the SLF has been spotted at this point. Um, so in terms of our socioeconomic methods that we're applying, we did one grape grower focus group with, I believe, yeah, it was 7 growers in Virginia last year. And we also conducted a grape grower survey. The net was cast pretty far and wide. We got help from Wine America and NGRA to distribute our survey because we wanted to learn from growers who are already encountering SLF as well as folks that are out on the West Coast and to learn more about what their concerns are, so that we can better help them. And then we also conducted a wine consumer survey, and that included a sampling of 1,000 different consumers, and we wanted to learn a little bit more from them about what their concerns were with SLF, how it was impacting their consumption patterns, and whether they'd be willing to pay more for a bottle of wine that was treated without pesticides, because we kept hearing from the growers that one of their main concerns was the use of pesticides or insecticides to kill SLF, because their consumers didn't want that. So let me just quickly run through some of the Virginia focus group results, and then I'll dig into the surveys a little bit more since those had, yeah, a much larger sample size. Our Virginia focus group results, which again informed our grower survey questions, um, the growers told us that SLF was first detected in their vineyard in 2023 and had started escalating in 2024. So that kind of pairs up with what Emily Hodgson said during the last panel. That's what she was seeing, that timeline. Some growers were seeing yield reductions of up to 85% already. Um, I assume that they had had SLF in their vineyards maybe a little bit longer. They were applying 4 to 5 additional insecticides per season to treat SLF alone. So that's on top of whatever else they might have already been doing. They were seeing a 15 to 20% increase in insecticide related expenses that included their labor, fuel, and the cost of sprays itself, just for SLF. And many reported delaying replanting new vines or postponing vineyard expansions because they just weren't sure how much it was going to cost them to control SLF and what SLF meant for the profitability of their vineyard long term. And they also told us that the tasting room visitors were reacting negatively to SLF, but at the same time disapproved of the use of insecticides to control SLF. So this is a very small sample size, 7 growers, and clearly these are growers that have already been struggling and fighting this invasive species on their vineyards. So, like I said, we cast the net a little bit wider with a grower survey in 2025. The survey went out, I believe it was May through July of 25. So hearing Emily talk, I realize now that why we got maybe some of the results we did, because maybe growers had initially had some success with SLF treatment and control, but we didn't capture what happened in the fall. And so we are planning, though, to go back and do this survey again in another year. So it'll be interesting to see how our results change. But for now, let me share these as baseline results in Virginia, or sorry, for the survey, and then we're going to focus on the results in Virginia because, as you can see, we had the largest response rate. We had 55% of the survey respondents came from Virginia. We also had a small cohort from Maryland and Pennsylvania, as well as a few from California, and then a smattering throughout the rest of mostly the eastern states there. I hope that when we do the survey again, we'll get even more respondents participating. But for now, we had 147. All right, let's focus on the Virginia growers. In terms of demographics, their median experience number of years growing grapes was 15. They were typically growing wine grapes, the Vitis vinifera, and maybe one other variety. They had a median annual gross income or a sales value of $100,000 per year, which would mean that they're quite small on average, or as a median, but on average, their annual gross sales rate was $736,000 per year. So we had presumably a few larger sales numbers pulling up that average. So we've got quite a diversity, I think, in size of growers out here and that participated in the survey. We also learned that agritourism was their top marketing channel in 2024. So 77% of growers were marketing direct to consumers through tasting events and wine tours and things like that. Okay, digging in a little bit more on vineyard size, as I mentioned, just looking at sales is one way to measure size and scale, and then acreage is another way. And so we can see here that the median acreage or vineyard size was 10.25 acres. So most of the growers answering the survey fell in that middle, kind of size uh, ranking there of 3.1 to 20 acres. But we did have a few that were greater than 20 acres and about an equal number that were below 3 acres. In terms of SLF impact in Virginia, 85% did report having seen SLF in their vineyard, so visually put eyes on them. The first year that SLF showed up in their vineyards, on average, was 2024. We had a few that said 2023 and a few that said 2025, but by far the majority said 2024. Many growers, 70%, reported low infestation, meaning less than 10% of their vines had SLF to medium, which means 10 to 25% of the vines were infested in 2024. So still seeing those low levels, right? It's new at this stage. Many growers, 67%, were actively managing for SLF in 2024 to control it. We asked what life stage they were managing for and how they were managing. In terms of life stage, 91% were focusing on killing or controlling the adults. 45% were focusing on the eggs and 38% on the nymphs. Another 38% were managing for two or more life stages. And this is important because we've learned, the research team that I'm working with has learned doing, egg counts and doing nymph scans and adult counts that the most treatable life stage would be the nymph life stage. That's when they're most susceptible. And so this tells me, the survey results tell us that right now growers are managing that stage the least, right? They're targeting the nymphs the least when that is probably the place to be or the way to be most effective. We know why they're going after adults. Again, these are tasting rooms. They're getting, complaints from their customers that there are these, insects flying around while they're trying to enjoy their wine. And so it's a real nuisance and they can't have that. So it makes sense. We understand why they're going after adults, but I think maybe, and again, I'm the economist, so I'm not the entomologist, but I imagine that we will have some extension recommendations down the road, to say that, really the growers should be going after the nymphs if nothing else. Currently, we know that half of the growers, 50%, are spending about 21 to 40 hours per year, per season, to manage or reduce SLF. So not too much. It's actually a little less than I would have expected. But again, I think we're just getting started here in terms of SLF impact. For control strategies that growers are using right now, many growers, 60%, are using insecticides. Not a surprise. Some growers were using other treatments such as exclusion netting, egg scraping, removal of the egg masses, and they are also targeting the tree of heaven. So removing tree of heaven altogether. In terms of the insecticides that are being used, the broad spectrum insecticides like Mustang Max, Scorpion, and Seven are the most widely used by the growers. And that is whether they're treating just for SLF or SLF plus another insect. And you can see here I have the names of the insecticides along the x-axis, the percent of growers that are using them on the y, and then just above each one of the bars is the number of times that insecticide was applied in one season to treat SLF. So I'll let you look at that or take a screenshot if you would like. Okay, in terms of control costs, so what are growers spending to try to control SLF right now in Virginia, where we know it's fairly new for some of these growers? Half of the growers were spending less than $1,000 a year to manage SLF at all life stages. A third of growers were spending $1,000 to $5,000 per year to manage at all life stages. And those costs were primarily comprised of spray costs, so insecticide costs, the labor and the spray itself. And 71% of growers felt that SLF management itself did not impact profitability. Now, again, after hearing Emily's talk, I am wondering if I want to go back and look at our survey question to ask if we I believe we specifically asked about managing SLF, so not the impact on profitability through, loss of product and quality and yield or vine replacement or anything like that. So we did ask a question similar to that, but not exactly. So I'm going to be revisiting my survey questionnaire the next time we release this for sure. And I will also be looking at the stuck fermentation rate. So I will be asking that question as well. So thank you, Emily. Um, in terms of risk tolerance, we also asked this question because we know that, risk is really a good indicator of how willing growers are to spend money up front if it means they have a payoff long term, right? So they're willing to spend money short term to gain something long term. They're willing to sort of take that risk. That would mean they have a high risk tolerance. If they're very cautious and not willing to spend much money upfront without knowing for sure what the long-term costs are or implications are, then they would have a low risk tolerance or more of a risk aversion. So we asked this question, and it's interesting. The Virginia growers would consider themselves moderate to high risk takers, which is good news for the researchers in Extension who are trying to put together some of these strategies to control or moderate SLF, because it means we have growers out there who are willing to work with us and want to solve this problem, right? So I think this is very promising news, and so we've got some good potential adoption rates for new ideas like biocontrols if we can determine that they work. Okay, on to the consumer survey. I just have a few slides here. This consumer survey was prepared by the University of Georgia, and they just finished collecting their results in December of 2025. So they're continuing right now to analyze the results, but they were able to share a couple of slides with me, and I will do my best to represent them well. The consumer survey included 1,000 consumers age 18 plus, and I should just back up and say the impetus for this consumer survey, it wasn't actually part of our project initially, but because we got that feedback from growers at the focus groups or at that initial focus group and because we know that they are primarily marketing through agritourism events, we wanted to go back and find out just how much of an issue SLF was for these consumers, because that was really a key concern of the growers, that they were going to lose business due to SLF during tasting events. So we wanted to go out and just really find out what the consumers themselves were saying. And so we've got 1,000 responses in the states that are colored in sort of that peach color there on the left: New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Virginia, New Jersey. And hopefully you can make it out. I think the numbers are a little small, but you can see above each state or below it, there's a little percent there of the respondents. So you can tell where they came from. The majority were from New York. And then the second largest group was from Pennsylvania. In terms of consumer kind of demographics, we know that there was an equal number, 30% were considered millennials and Gen Xers, and then another equal percentage, 20%, were considered baby boomers and Gen Zers. So pretty good distribution, and it is considered representative of the adult population in these states. The key question, this is the one the growers wanted to know, was one, consumer attitudes towards pesticide use for SLF. So we asked, do you believe spraying pesticides to manage spotted lanternfly in vineyards to ensure a consistent wine product is acceptable? 80% of consumers said yes, and 10% said no. We asked another question to tease that apart a little bit more, and we said, do you believe spraying pesticides to manage spotted lanternfly in vineyards to ensure grapes are of a high quality is acceptable? Again, 79% said yes, 11% said no. So there's good support from consumers. I think they are either they're being well educated about SLF, or they have a low tolerance for the insecticide use, which I don't think is the case. So I think they are being very, very well educated about SLF, and they understand, that it's going to require some insecticides in order to control SLF, and they are willing to tolerate some of that. As far as where the growers were buying, 63% came from or had visited a winery in our target survey states. So they are the ones attending those tastings at the vineyards, and they are understanding of the need to use pesticides. 70% had purchased a bottle of wine in a store, and 60% had had a glass in a restaurant in those same states. Okay, before I go to that, one other result that we did ask, or a question that we asked was, were growers willing to pay more for a glass of wine or a bottle of wine that was produced without insecticides? And the answer came back generally yes. And the team is currently quantifying exactly how much. So that will be information that we can go back to growers with, if they are using alternative methods, if the biocontrols that the team is researching are effective, then that's an option. If it does end up costing them more to implement those biocontrols, we know growers or consumers are willing to pay more for wine produced with that, and we hope that might offset some of those costs. So that's kind of the thinking here. That's where we're going. We're just trying to collect this baseline data and information right now. In terms of just big takeaways, we know that growers have a really positive attitude towards controlling SLF and are willing to take risks. They are generally right now using broad spectrum insecticides. There isn't much else in their toolbox. And likely to reduce input expense and target additional. I don't know what I meant by likely to reduce input expense, but they're generally using broad spectrum. Broad spectrum insecticides, which can reduce other input expenses, if they're targeting additional pests. So that it makes sense that they would be using these broad spectrum insecticides to treat SLF plus maybe one other insect. So mixing in the tank or using the broad spectrum insecticides themselves. Growers are predominantly targeting adult SLF life stage. We know that there's limited consumer, at least amongst the survey growers, 1,000 survey takers, there's limited consumer opposition to pesticide use for managing SLF in vineyards. And some consumers are willing to pay more for a bottle of wine produced without pesticides or insecticides. So I think that's promising for the biological control research that's being done. Okay, I'm going to stop there. And I don't know if there are any questions in the chat.
So there was one question that came in early in your presentation from Gary about the tasting room visitors' reaction to insecticide. And the question is, are the reactions predicated on miscommunications of organic growers' use of insecticides or other attitudes towards insecticide changing recently?
I think that I wasn't in the room for I'm assuming they're talking about the focus group. And I wasn't in the room for that. That was also conducted by the University of Georgia. I did the producer survey. But from what we learned, it sounds like there really has been this education going on, especially in other states we know where SLF has been around for a while. But I think so that's why I think we're getting those different results in the consumer survey than we did in the focus group. I think the focus group folks were saying that their customers, I don't know if they were organic or not, but I think they're saying that their customers were not happy about pesticide use, and at the same time, they didn't like SLF. So yeah, mixed, which are kind of mixed messages there, or that's just a consumer not understanding what it takes to produce, a clean glass of wine, right?
Hmm.
So Maybe the consumers that were, because the consumer survey went out to areas where SLF has been present for much longer, New York, Pennsylvania, and I think there's probably been more education there and understanding by this point.
Sure. Yeah. We've definitely been doing our best to get the word out. A lot of people in New York City and Philadelphia are well aware of spotted lanternfly at this point. There was one thing that you talked about, which was the difference in spending by life stage.
Yes.
And what do you think explains why the adults is it because kind of the squeaky wheel, the obvious problem, is the focus?
Yeah, I think so. It's, they can't have spotted lanternfly. Literally, they said their customers in the focus group, they said their customers are literally like swatting at spotted lanternfly while they're trying to drink their wine, or it's landing in the glass of wine. So I think they're, pulling out all the stops to try to control SLF during this, harvest stage or, during the fall when the tours are going on because, it's just they can't, people aren't going to enjoy it. They're not going to come back. So yeah, I think that's why. And I think there's been a really good push to do the egg mass scrapings. I know there are even events at vineyards where they're, it's like, come on out, scrape some eggs, get a free glass of wine, or, something like little promotional activities. And so I think, that's the other reason we're seeing the vineyards focus on the egg scraping versus, going after those instar phases.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't see any other questions in the chat. Let me look again. Oh, there is one, sorry, from Ashley Leach. Hi, Ashley. Do you expect differences in grow responses based on their levels of experience dealing with spotted lanternfly? How does that change the strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. And when we did the grower survey, when we initially, conceived of that, my hope was that we would get enough growers in each, at least kind of area of the region. Like, I was hoping for a group of respondents from New York and Pennsylvania where SLS has been present for a long time, and then maybe a cohort from Virginia, and Georgia or North Carolina. Um, because I wanted to be able to compare those two, looking at where SLF has been around for a long time and how those respondents' answers would differ from groups like Virginia, where it's new. And unfortunately, we just didn't get the responses that we were looking for. We did our best. Cornell and Penn State did a wonderful job of fielding that survey, but we just weren't getting the responses. I hope next year, or yeah, next year when we launch the survey, that even if we don't get more results up from that Northeastern area, even if we do just get more from Virginia, we'll be able to compare now, what SLF looked like, what the economics looked like to an area that's brand new from our 2025 survey to, now a couple years down the road when they've been dealing with it for a couple of years, and more people are probably going to sound like Emily Hodgson. So,
Hmm. Yeah, the expanding range and the die-off that's been seen temporarily, kind of the donut effect, sure, is very interesting in your data collection.
yes, yes, absolutely. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Gigi.